Dion Timms Williams grew up in Castle Close, Craigie in Wales, United Kingdom. She lived with her mother and father, who were both described as lovely people. Growing up, people in Dion's life said that she was quiet, friendly, and polite. Neighbors who lived near the family said that Dion was sweet. They described her as pretty and said she never caused trouble, saying that she was a joy to be around. She had a good close relationship with her father, who was a mechanic, spending her free time helping him fix up cars. Dion even intended to follow in her father's footsteps as she grew older, planning to become a vehicle mechanic herself after she left high school. By the time she was a teenager, she had hopes of pursuing a successful career in the car industry, hopeful about the future ahead. However, all of this would change. Craigie is a picturesque village in the scenic landscapes of South Wales, with a name that translates to rocks in Welsh. It is a natural beauty that is known for having a sense of tranquility. Surrounded by lush greenery, the village offers a peaceful escape from the hustle and bustle of city life, while embracing its rural charm. Craigie is also within the reach of modern conveniences. Residents can enjoy the balance of the countryside without sacrificing access to essential amenities. With a rich history and a warm community spirit, it is a hidden gem in the Welsh countryside, inviting all who visit an experience of beauty and peace. This is where Dion and her family made their home. As she reached adolescence, Dion's life began to drastically change when her parents decided to get a divorce. After her father left and Dion lived with her mother full-time, she lost the sense of closeness that she once had in a relationship with her father. Neighbors said that Dion began hanging around suspicious characters at school. She also began engaging in drinking and smoking illicit substances. She no longer said hello if she was passing a neighbor on the street, and she seemingly became more and more withdrawn at school, and further away from a positive social life. Many didn't know how to react to this drastic change in her life. Her mother decided to seek out mental health care for Dion, trying to get help for feelings of anxiety and anger, a situation where she was believed to have had borderline personality disorder and a history of self-harm. As Dion's mental health continued to decline, by the time she was 16, she was commonly described as a Jekyll and Hyde, with friends and family saying that while someday she was the sweet innocent girl they had remembered, she also became someone completely different when she consumed certain substances. It became obvious to the entire village that Dion had gotten involved with the wrong people and the wrong activities. Oftentimes she would look vacant, and other times she would be completely out of control. Everyone in her life hoped that professional care would help Dion get back to the girl that they once knew. The girl who was sweet, innocent, and kind. However, instead, she would go on to escalate her behaviors. She would sadly soon become involved in an incident that she couldn't escape from. Dr. Gary Jenkins was a 54-year-old, well-liked, upstanding citizen who lived alone in Cardiff. Cardiff being just 7 miles away from Craigie. Known as incredibly generous and creative, Gary was a psychiatrist who always had the best intentions. He played music at social events. He enjoyed nature, and he had a true passion for making people's lives better. Despite being divorced, Gary was able to maintain an amicable relationship with his ex-wife. He also kept an extremely loving and close relationship with his 2 daughters. Everyone who knew Gary was affected in a positive way by his uplifting and colorful energy. Despite his many years in service as a psychiatrist, he was planning to begin reducing his hours so he could become a wildlife ranger, finally pursuing his passion for animals and nature. Unfortunately, as he walked through the park on the morning of July 19, 2020, this dream of his was made sure to never come true. Gary Jenkins was walking through the familiar Butte Park. He was looking to meet with what he called like-minded men. He had been divorced for 6 years, and in an attempt to get back into the dating world, Gary was seeking out other men for the possibility of forming a romantic connection. As he walked through the park, he encountered 3 individuals, 2 men and 1 woman. The individuals began to approach Gary, walking towards him with an ominous gait. He sensed that they didn't have good intentions, and he did his best to avoid them. This proved to be unsuccessful, however, as the group continued to close in on him. With Gary then feeling a sharp pain to his body, he fell to the ground, and immediately he then began enduring endless punches, kicks, and stomps from the three mystery assailants. He cried out in pain as they continued to attack him. Gary yelled out to them, asking why they were doing this to them and begging them to stop. Instead of answering his cries, the three attackers continued to beat him senselessly, with Gary hearing them laugh and call him horrific names as they landed more blows over his entire body. He did his best to block himself from their blows as the assailants said, "Hit him again," over and over. The three then inhumanely pulled down Gary's red-stained trousers, and they continued to physically attack him. As Gary began to lose consciousness, he felt the warmth and heaviness of another body laying on top of his. An heroic stranger who was witnessing the event was attempting to shield Gary from the ruthless blows at the hands of these individuals. Even though the stranger was doing his best to protect Gary's life, he was no match for the mysterious assailants who pulled him off and assaulted him as well. The three figures delighted in their evil deeds as Gary's world went black. He was left lying in the middle of a park, humiliated and relentlessly beaten. When the three sadistic attackers were finished with Gary, they took all of his belongings and left. This left the witness to call for authorities and emergency services. Gary was immediately rushed to hospital where doctors attempted to treat his injuries. He suffered major brain injuries as a result of the blows he sustained, aimed repeatedly at his head during the attack. While Gary was in the hospital attempting to recover, authorities quickly dispatched a team to investigate the seemingly random, brutal beating. Luckily, CCTV footage with views of the park were quickly recovered. Police spent the following week combing through every second surrounding the attack. It was during this week that police recovered footage of the three assailants, the people who had approached Jenkins in the park that night. The only thing left to do was to identify these individuals. Again, it didn't take much longer for the police to identify who they were. They were 25-year-old Jason Edwards, 36-year-old Lee Strickland, and 16-year-old Dion Timms Williams. Shocked by these findings, police immediately arrested Dion, bringing her to the station for questioning. Following her arrest, Dion proved to be a closed book devoid of any emotions. She remained quiet during the entire process. She refused to answer any questions, and she bit her lip. She even showed an eerie smirk in her mugshot. In this, in the storyboard that we got was there's several photos of you as you accepting your statement you're a female one. Where are the clothes that you were wearing that night? No comment. So I think when you're first seeing the cam, you've got like a jacket on, possibly either black socks or black tights with black at the bottom. They look like Vans trainers. Can you tell me where we can find those clothes? No comment? Where's the mic bag that you had with you on the line? Is there any reason that you can't or won't tell me where those clothes in that bag are? No comment. However, police weren't too concerned about her silence. Amazingly, they had CCTV footage which showed every second of the attack, which was mindlessly carried out against Gary Jenkins. Although it would have been helpful to hear his side of the story, officers didn't need his words. After police released her to continue gathering evidence on August 5th, 2020, Gary Jenkins sadly succumbed to his brain injuries. The injuries caused by these three assailants. This turned the investigation from attempted homicide into a homicide investigation. Shortly after, Dion sent a prepared statement to the police station. This was an attempt at explaining her side of the story. According to her, she had only participated in the events because of the immense fear that she felt from the other two individuals. She reported how she had been walking through the park, when suddenly she had seen the men punching and kicking Gary Jenkins. The two men then asked Dion to join in, causing her to be in fear for her life, and participating in the event to avoid physical consequences at their hands. However, the police weren't buying this story, and I'm not sure I do, either. They had CCTV footage which showed Dion's every move in the beginning of that night, and the details were truly chilling. This footage began with Dion walking through Cardiff streets on the night in question. She then came into contact with Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, two apparent strangers who had simply offered her a cider as they sat on a bench. After spending some time in conversation, the footage then caught Dion saying the words, "If we're staying in Butte Park, can we at least go and steal?" It was from this moment that the trio had planned to rob someone in that park. And just minutes later, CCTV footage caught the moment that the trio decided to prey on Gary Jenkins as he walked through the park. Butte Park was well known as an area where gay men, some closeted, would go to meet, and the trio wanted to target someone who would be less likely to report their crimes. Security cameras recorded every second of the attack. It showed Dion laughing. She was confident and full of glee with what she was doing. Following the brutal attack, Dion can be heard saying the chilling words, "I needed that." As the group of assailants looted his body, Dion was shown laughing once more. She was hugging and kissing Jason Edwards as they celebrated their successful attack. After this, Edwards and Strickland went to buy alcohol with Gary Jenkins' credit card, and then Williams went to stay with a friend. Police now had cold hard proof that Dion's innocent story of being in fear for her life was a complete lie. The three were promptly arrested and charged with the brutal, ruthless homicide of the beloved Dr. Gary Jenkins. Reporter, Tyler Gordon-Winton, Beaver Superbank, Ren 65, 965, Fish. Knowing that there was no way they could argue their innocence anymore, all three pled guilty to manslaughter, along with robbery, which resulted in intentional bodily harm. During a sentencing trial, the court heard from the witness who had attempted to save Gary's life. He reported seeing Dion confidently laughing, with all three of them thoroughly enjoying the torture that they were putting Gary through. On the opposite end, Dion's defense team tried to argue for a lighter sentence. They cited her mental health history and vulnerability to exploitation due to historical trauma. Additionally, Dion's defense team also tried to argue that the crime was not motivated by Gary's orientation, saying that Dion herself had been in a relationship with another female. Ultimately, though, the judge aggressively disagreed with these claims, saying that the crime was motivated by greed and sheer hate. Judge Daniel Williams ruled that all three individuals were equally responsible for the crime, although Dion's participation was most unsettling. He sentenced Dion Timms Williams to a minimum of 17 years in prison, before then being eligible for parole due to her minor status. He handed out harsher sentences to the other two. They both received a minimum of 33 years in prison. The judge stated during his sentencing that all of those who knew and loved Gary Jenkins would be left with a void in their lives that would never be filled. After all, this was a father. The attack upon Dr. Jenkins by these three defendants was cowardly and senseless in the extreme. The degree and duration of unnecessary violence inflicted upon him, together with homophobic abuse, all captured on audio, was both sickening and staggering. His family said today, Gary was such a kind soul who would never hurt anyone. He was an incredibly generous and creative man who had only good intentions. Gary was one of the most humane, kind, compassionate doctors one could ever come across. The trio showed no reaction as they were led to their cells with their new sentences. Dion will first serve her sentence in a young offenders institute before being moved to an adult prison after she turns 18. Do you think the punishments fit the crime here? What do you think could be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. And remember, if you appreciate what I'm doing here, please do hit that like button. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.